Welcome to Sonic Treason. My name is BJ Vanderver. I've created this channel to help the DIY musician with recording, gear selection, you name it. So I'm going to go through recommendations of, everything from a mixer to microphones, anything that could help the average musician record and release their own music. I think most of the things that you need to do this are pretty simplistic and inexpensive. I'm going to get started on this channel with working from a band practice session and how to make sure that you purchase equipment that is going to be able to be utilized in multiple ways. Say, if you buy a mixer, these days digital mixers allow you to record live, so I see no reason not to do that. You can buy cheap microphones, cheap cables, and just get started somewhere. Me personally, I highly recommend the Zoom LiveTrack L20, not the rack version, although the rack version probably would be sufficient. The reason why is because it has 20 inputs, so we're going to start there and we'll go down and take a look at my band practice area and why I have my setup the way it is. Okay, so here we are in my practice space, which is a 2-car garage. It's not ideal by any recording engineer standard, but we're a different day and age now, and there's a lot of people who are in a DIY recording situation are probably lucky to have a 2-car garage to be able to do this to. I would say your drums are your most important thing. You can record a DI for guitars and use amp sims if you're in a place where you need to be quiet. You can DI bass, that's completely fine. And for vocals, there's a couple different ways to approach that, but essentially you just need to find a quiet space and, do your best to get a good performance. So if you do have a 2-car garage, I can tell you what I did with mine. I essentially put moving blankets on the walls. I didn't put treatment up to completely deaden the space, because if you deaden the space, you get no reverberation, the room just sounds dead. You don't want to cover every square inch with soundproofing or moving blankets. These moving blankets are pretty cheap. I got them for $8 or $9 at Harbor Freight. There's probably 6 or 7 of them up, and they're only on the back wall here. On the front wall behind you, it's a flat brick wall, and I have a couple of panels, soundproofing panels or sound absorption panels that I built. I'm going to go through the drum mic setup, and I can point out the amplifiers that I have here. I have 2 guitar players and the bass player. Then multiple vocals. We have a vocal mic here, vocal mic over there where the backup singer is at, and then I sit over here by the mixing board, actually behind me there. So yeah, let's get into the drum miking techniques that I use and what I find to be most effective and which sound best for me. Here I have the mixer set up. This is the Zoom LiveTrack L20. I use this for band practice. I have 4 vocals just so that we can talk to each other. Kick, snare, tom 1, tom 2. Tom 3 is not used for this band, so I use it as a kick out mic. I have a hi-hat mic, overhead left, overhead right, my guitar, and second guitar player, and bass. I also have room mics routed to this stereo channel. The reason why I like this is because it has an SD port that you can essentially record your band practices, but also you can hook up a USB to this and you can use it as an audio interface, and you can record full songs with it, and the quality of it is very good. The other thing that makes this nice is that it has these different monitor outs. So you have 6 monitor outs here that you can plug headphones in, and this allows you to listen to your band practice through headphones and record it. So you can essentially dial your sounds in very well. Has a compressor on every channel aside from the 2 stereo channels. I have a phone hookup for this, and this allows you to either switch between the USB audio, which would be connected to your computer, or your RCA, or even some 2 stereo inputs here. The cool thing about this is that you can record all of your WAV files prior to the compressor or any of the effects on here. So essentially, it allows you to take a separate output to your computer where it won't print the compression that you put on your mix, and it won't print the EQ. It won't do anything from this side of the board. It'll only take the WAV files from the gain section up, which is great because your mix decisions that are made here won't affect your WAV file outputs, and that'll allow you to mix it completely differently and unaffected. I highly recommend this. This is about, I think, $1,000. You can even travel with it, and I've recorded shows on the SD card, which is great. You can actually set up your microphones and completely record a live show, and you could mix that down and release that if you wanted to. So I cannot recommend this enough. I think this is a must-have for any band. Okay, so we have our kick drum mic here, mic setup. Right here I have a Beta B52 Shure. I find for any kick drum mic, you can either put it here or you can put it inside. I tend to just leave it here for this particular microphone because I think it gets a good bit of body, and this microphone gets a lot of high-end snap as well. I like to put it where this blue line pretty much lines up with the head as close as you can, and then I try to point this towards the beater. In addition to that, I have this Worm Audio WA47 Junior microphone. You can get one of these used for, I don't know, $200-300 I guess. It's been a long time, so I don't exactly know how much they are. But anyways, I place this in front of the kick. Essentially the way that I figure out where I want to put this is by having the drummer hit the kick drum, and I put my hand there to feel where the air stops, like where you stop feeling the air hit your hand very hard. And it just so happens to be like right around here. I have the floor marked right there. So yeah, this just adds a little bit more low end to the kick drum mic. I end up taking off most of the high frequencies off of this microphone to focus solely on the low end of the kick for this microphone. So here I have the snare drum mic. What I do with this microphone is I will point it towards where the center of the snare is at a downward angle, and depending on how high pitched I want it, the closer you are to the edge, the higher pitch you get, and the further in you get more body. At least that's what I have found. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. You should move everything around and find things out for yourself. But this works pretty well for me, especially with this snare drum, because it's approximately 4 inches thick and it's a piccolo snare, obviously. So I try to get as much body out of it as I can. As for the snare bottom mic, I do not use a snare bottom mic typically. I find that the room mics are really good for picking up the low end of the high end and snare wires. When I do solo recordings where I'm just recording the drums, I do put the bottom mic there. I just get a small stand and point it up, but I'll flip the phase on the mic preamp, just try to get it in phase, and then usually when I get to the mixing phase, it's not a very prominent mic. It's just there to add a little bit of sizzle to the snare from picking up the snare wires. So for this setup, the close mics also include the 2 toms. I have a rack tom and a floor tom. On this rack tom, I just have a rack mounted, a microphone mount for this rack tom. This is a Shure PG56. I would typically use the same mic on all the toms, but for this, I found that the AKG D112 worked really well in this tom. It's not necessary to use a kick drum mic on a floor tom. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The most important thing is to experiment. So next we have a hi-hat mic. This is an Audix F15. I think you can see it there. Let's see. Yeah, Audix F15. The way I position this microphone is pretty harsh. So I essentially try to point it away from the stick at the edge of the cymbal. That just seems to give me the best sound. In addition to this, I did want to touch on the fact that the snare mic here is very close to this hi-hat. I would not do this typically. The drummer for this band cut this hi-hat down very short, and there is only a few fingers in between the snare mic and the hi-hat. So typically I would want to keep this hi-hat up and away from this mic. You'll get a lot of bleed into that when you're recording, and it can be very difficult. So next up I have the overhead mics. I set these up in a position that is a little bit different. I learned this from a guy who knows a man who was wanted dead or alive. So essentially the mic, I use these AKG C214s. They're set to cardioid pattern, but essentially I bring them in at like a 45-degree angle and essentially try to get an image of the kit. They're down at an angle. One's pointed in this direction, the other is pointed in this direction, and not worried about measuring from the snare to the capsule. What you'll see here is that they are approximately the same height. And that's all I really concern myself with, is whether they're at the same height and they're pointed down at an angle towards, you know, the cymbal. So essentially this is covering this area, and if you go over here, this microphone is covering this area. So you get a full picture of the kit like that. And then back in the back there, you see how fancy my place is. I have a room mic there, and I have a room mic there. I put the covers over the room mics when they're not in use, so that yeah, it preserves the life of my microphones. Those microphones are very good for capturing the full sound of the snare. I'm gonna walk over here. These are AKG, sorry, these are Audio-Technica. Let's see if we can get that to focus there. There it is. Audio-Technica AT4040s. And they're a very bright microphone. I typically would not use these for room mics because they are so bright. Typically, I like my room mics to be dark, but I just EQ these so that the brightness is taken out of them. Maybe that is just not so prominent, but these work this position works very well for capturing a good image. And like I said, I really like them because they capture the snare sound very well. I find that the room mics really help with getting a full snare sound, like a complete snare sound rather. That does it for drums, but next we have guitars. I have a JVM Marshall 410H. It's not plugged up to this Mesa cabinet. I'll go into that in a minute. And then I have a Mesa dual rec that the other guitar player uses. It's not plugged into this Harvey Benton cab. And then bass is going through this Ampeg V4BH. If you're a guitar player running an Axe-Fx or a Fractal or Line 6, you don't have to worry about cab noise when recording in a live situation. My JVM Marshall has a direct out that I can just plug into the board, and you can record live with headphones in. I find that the sound of that is not very good. I took a tip off of Colt Caparoon, which if you're into recording at all, he's very good at pretty much everything. So he made this DIY ISO cab for guitars. I wanted to find, his cost something around $1,200, I believe, just for the materials. And not everybody is able to afford that just for a cab. You know, you can just get a regular cab and it'd be so much cheaper, but then on top of getting a regular 1x12 cab, you would have to build a box around it. So I took his idea and I got on Facebook and found a old chest. So I've also built one out of birch plywood like he did for the other guitar, and then one for the bass as well. But this is my fun one. It was probably, I think, $60 for the chest. It may have been cheaper, and that may have been $30. I can't remember. But essentially, sorry. It's a cabinet inside of a cab. It has, let's see if we can take a look here. It has connections for your XLR and your speaker output. If you have a tube amp, you have to have that plugged in before you even turn your tube amp on, or you may blow your tube amp up, you know. Who knows? Maybe you like doing that type of thing. I don't. But anyways, this is all suspended in here. I'll take a closer look. This is all suspended in here with these hangers, so it's free floating. And you know, obviously there's a speaker and a microphone inside. Usually what I use is a SM57 for this, but I wanted this to sound different. So this is a warehouse speaker. It's a Reaper 30, and I have the Bear Dynamic TG or Bear Dynamic 201. This box isolated between the speaker and the microphone, obviously, and I like to point the microphone towards the edge of the dust cap, where the dust cap meets the cone. This is only needed if you don't have an Axe-Fx, Kemper, Line 6. I could go through how to build this, but Colt Caparoon's already done it, and you can essentially just look at his DIY guitar ISO cab. Now, I didn't go through this in the same way that he did. I wasn't as thorough. I don't feel the need to be as thorough because I'm not turning my amp up very loud. I find that it's not needed. So here I have my bass ISO cab. This has a 10-inch, I believe it's a Celestion Pulse speaker in it. As you can see, I run the wires from inside the garage. It's right there. The cables I usually use the Amazon Basic cables, unless if I'm doing like a final recording, then I'll try to use at least a mid-grade these or the Amazon basic cables tend to have some cell phone interference and things like that you just do not want in your final recording. I find that the SM7B is very good on bass. It just has a really good low end and high end to it. And there are also different techniques that I use for recording bass, but typically you can use a DI and then mix it with your cab. But you take a look at the setup of this microphone. So I try to essentially, this is just sitting in here, pointed again where the dust cap meets the cone. So I don't know how well you can see that, but yeah, SM7, and I take the pop filter off of the microphone as well. Okay, so that's a little tour of my setup and how and why I set everything up. But I think the key element of all of this is, how do you do these things in the most budget-friendly way possible? Everybody needs a mixer for their PA. You're going to spend a certain amount on that. You might as well try to knock out two birds with one stone and get yourself one of these digital mixers that allow you to use them as an interface as well. You're going to want to record regardless. If you're writing your own music, eventually you're going to want to record. I just find that the Zoom is very, very well equipped to help someone record. There's also a Tascam Model 24. I think it's supposed to be pretty good. I have not tried it, but it's the same principle. I'm sure if you dig into that, it would work pretty well for you. I think that it takes care of multiple things if you get that style of mixer, and just get yourself some powered PA speakers, which just saves you money in the long run. So yeah, like and subscribe if you like what you see. If you find it helpful in any way, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. So yeah, I'll see you next time, and yeah, looking forward to getting some feedback and answering any questions that you may have, you motherfuckers.